because for some reason I thought it was next week.
All right, we're on YouTube.
Okay. So I want to welcome everybody to the April 24th, 2025 meeting of the St. Catharines Heritage Advisory Committee. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Okay, do we have any additions or deletions to be made to the agenda for today? Nothing? Okay, so we're going to have a motion to move that we approve the agenda. Mark, thank you. And all in favor? Okay, done. Minutes of the previous meeting from March the 27th, 2025. Do you have any questions, comments, or changes to be made?
Changes just to grammar and syntax, and not content, but I have made them and I'm going to send it to Lauren after the meeting, just in my usual editing format.
Right.
Okay.
No major changes though.
No content changes at all, just syntax, punctuation, grammar, that kind of stuff. Conventions, just conventions, but no content. So if anybody has any content, I could add that to my changes too.
So if we're just changing punctuation and stuff, that doesn't count as an amended set of minutes, does it?
No, I think usually what we do is if everyone agrees with the minutes and anyone has any like spelling or grammar edits, I make them when finalizing them. And so we just usually move it with the understanding that those will be fixed.
Okay. So if there's no other complaints or changes to be made to the minutes, then I guess we should have a motion to approve them. Holly, saw your hand go up first. Thank you. And all in favor? Okay. Declarations of interest. Do we have any? Seeing none, then I guess we can move on to the business at hand for the day. So item 7.1, the oil fountain design update. And I believe Adrian is here to, hello, Adrian, to razzle dazzle us.
Whoa. I didn't agree to any razzling or dazzling.
You're no fun. Anyway, take it away, Adrian.
I suppose I could sing this, but no, I won't. Yeah, so we're very happy to present to you the final design for the oil fountain interpretive panel. You can kind of see it in situ with our staff Olivia and Lauren holding the panel there nearby the fountain, and then the middle slide is the print ready file. Thanks, Lauren. So you saw the text, I think. When did we see the text, Lauren? In December or January? You're on mute.
I believe it was December. Yep.
December.
Yep.
Fabulous. So the text is there, and then with the photos that we ended up going with are just above. Yep, perfect. So Oil himself from his portrait, photo from the collection, which was probably, I think, always on the list of the courthouse there, B. And then C is a really interesting photo of a mid-century photo of it with some folks leaning on the fence, which is kind of neat. But in the background, a photo of some buildings that are no longer there, the Midtown Hotel, the Save More. So a little bit more neighborhood context in those photos. just some interesting mid-century garbage bins as well, and benches. So the file's print ready, so I think it's been sent off to Fantasy for production. And then we're working with Olivia on a installation date. Olivia at the in the culture department, because the and good thing the photo of it is here. The flower pot on the top, that's what I call it. I'm sure it has an official name. And the two lions' heads on both sides have been removed. Well, the flower pot's being reconstructed and then and restored, and the lions' heads are being restored as well currently. So we're trying to coordinate the installation of the interpretive panel with the reinstallation of those elements. So I don't have a date for that yet, but we'll announce and invite everyone to that unveiling at some point when we're ready. I'm hoping in the early summer, maybe late spring. I don't know. I don't have a timeline on the restoration of those elements. So, and that's that. Lauren, I wonder if you want to send the panel to the committee so they have a copy of it, even just a JPEG of it, or a small
Um,
file, the small file version of the PDF.
I believe I did send this exact PDF out to
Oh,
everybody
perfect. Okay.
as a
So
part
everybody's
of
got it.
this
Awesome.
circulation. Yep, yep.
Super. And that's that.
Thank you,
Okay.
Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the one thing that I really like about the vintage photo of the courthouse
Mm.
is that it shows those urns that are up near the clock tower, the bell tower, um,
Yes.
which those have long disappeared. I don't know, are they even in existence anymore?
I don't know.
Because they've never been on the courthouse as long as I can remember.
Right.
And like you say,
But yeah,
it's nice to see things like the Hotel Midtown and the Save More and that other shot, because those are just distant memories for a lot of people as well.
exactly. Yeah.
But it looks like it'll make a handsome plaque.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Uh, Lorraine, you had a question?
I think Rachel was before me.
You want to fight over it?
No, I'm just gonna let Rachel go first.
Okay,
I
Rachel, you have the floor.
thank you, Lorraine. That's very kind. I just had a question around the spelling of the architect's surname. I thought it was DG, not GD in Badgley.
Hmm. I'll have to look that up.
Okay. That was just
You
my
know, do you
remembering.
know in several of the records it's spelled that way?
Okay.
Because yes, we did look at that. Do you know, Brian, if it's
Uh, I I just thought it was Badgley, Badley.
right? We'll take a look at some of the records. It's possible sometimes that those get copied and pasted from record to record to record to record. So I'll take a closer look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Good catch, Rachel. Thank you. Lorraine.
I was just going to say thanks, Adrian, and everyone who provided input on the text. I think it's great, except for the Badgley. Thank you, Rachel. But which also I thought was sort of a weird pronunciation because that kind of is Bagdley, which is sort of odd. But anyways, you're going to check that. But I
Well, yeah.
thought that. Yeah, I thought that expressed everything that we were all interested in, and I like the pictures. I think they're very appropriate. So thank you, Adrian, and everybody.
Are we going to also have the tin cup installed back on the fountain?
I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't think it would be very sanitary in this day and
If
age.
yeah, and if like the permanent elements of the fountain have, previously gone missing or damaged, I imagine a mobile element would also disappear quite quickly. So,
All right.
but
Um,
but maybe in another lifetime or another world we could reinstall the tin cup.
yeah. And it'll be nice to get that urn, affixed to the top of the fountain, because I think the Historical Society's been chomping at the bit to do a geranium
Yes.
planting ceremony again.
Yes, and I did mention that to Olivia, so hopefully we can wrap all of those elements together for some kind of unveiling. So cross your fingers that, the season is right for geraniums, etc., planting, all that stuff. So
Yeah, although the last time we did a ceremony, I think we just put a silk geranium up there. No need to
Oh, okay.
water it.
Right. Very good.
Should we still have a motion to receive Adrian's update?
I don't think we need one, but we can. Yeah.
Does anybody want to make the motion? Lorraine, thank you. And all in favor? Okay, good. Item 7.2.
Thank you,
Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, everybody. I gotta go. Talk to you later. Nice to see you all.
Yep, ciao.
Thanks,
Bye.
Adrian.
We're moving on to item 7.2, which is the heritage permit for demolition and new construction at 115 Main Street in Port. And we have Dylan Earl here, I believe.
Good afternoon. Yes, I am here. Hello.
Hi. So take it away.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, everyone, today. My name is Dylan. I'm the project manager for this property on behalf of the owner. Today, I've put together a presentation. I'm big on visuals, so I tried to reduce the verbiage as much as possible, but this is a very important application, more so for the district. A demolition is not to be taken lightly, and we've put a lot of energy, time, and cost into the process. We've retained Leah Wallace, heritage planner, who is also with us today. I'd like to give her an opportunity to speak towards the end of my presentation. But I believe the best way for me to approach this will be to tell you our story, because this isn't just a simple request for demolition. We're actually looking to replace the building, hence the application to demolish and construct new. It's meant to be concurrent. This isn't our principal residence. We don't live here. The purpose of the property was it has massive side yard. We obtained a conditional severance approval for 2 lots beside it, which some of you might be familiar that I think it was last year I had gotten approvals for those new dwellings. So Lauren's gonna run the slideshow for me, so I'll just hit next when ready. There's quite a few because again, they're mostly visuals, but anyway, we can begin. So if you want to hit next. Just want to emphasize here that this isn't just demolition, it's demolition and construction. Next. And I'm gonna consider that a replacement. Next. So obviously we want to know why. Why are we applying for this application? Next. Number 1, the structure is unsafe. Now, this isn't an arbitrary, determination. We've had several structural engineers go through at the property. I've gone through at the property. We have tenants who have been living in the property that can no longer live in the property. So we have many reasons to say that it is unsafe on professional, personal, and realistic experience. And then number 2, what really prompted this, or really threw us over the line of submitting this application, is that this existing duplex exceeds the density for the area as a result of hazard lands. Now, I don't want to get into that too much because I know it's a planning item, but I do want to tell that story because it contributes to this whole application. So if you want to hit next, Lauren. So sorry, just to recap. So structure, major state of disrepair, removal and replacement is the only option. The structure, which supports everything, therefore everything has to be removed to replace that structure. So that in conclusion, we have to replace everything, the entire building. Just doing ad hoc little pieces of replacements here and there, it's just logistically and physically not possible. Next. So our ultimate goal is to replace, demolish and construct new, replace the existing building on the left with the building on the right. We have worked hard with our designer and our heritage planner, Leah, to ensure that the mass, the form, the character is contributing to the area in a positive manner. Next. So now the density conformity. Again, don't want to get too technical, but a large piece of our property has to be given to the city because it's considered hazard land. They consider everything beyond the stable top of slope to be a hazard. And in our case, since we're on the water's edge of the Martindale Pond, that is a significant portion of the land. So by transferring this land away, our lot area essentially is decreased. So because we have an existing duplex, which now we have to convert to single family, a single unit to conform with the low density policy, this is what we have to do. Next. So here it is just from the planner. I've highlighted general density requirements in this area are 20 to 30 units per hectare, and the total lot density and lot area do not conform with the policies of the official plan or the zoning bylaw. Next. So we're going to get into some visuals here so we can pretty much go next. This is the subject property, as we're all aware. This is just a really far zoomed out area. Here we are. This is important. This is the top of slope. You'll notice to the east, properties such as number 2, 25, 21 Pine, they're beyond the stable top of slope. But because we're going through a planning application, we're treated differently. So therefore, that red line has a big bearing on our property. Next. Here it is just over an aerial. Next. So this is the area that's to be dedicated to the city. Next. Sorry, not only do we have to be away from the top of slope, but we also want a stable setback, which was determined by a geotechnical engineer. Again, don't want to get into the technicalities. Next. Next. So this is our approved severance. Next. Here it is just without the background. Next. So this is what we were hoping. To sever, 3 lots all the way down to the water. Next. And this would actually allow us to conform to the official plan policy because we would be within that density range. Next. Which was between 20 to 32 units. But because we have to dedicate that Part 5 lands, next. Because we have to dedicate this land, it cuts off 50% of our lot area. So I really want to emphasize that is another major factor that's influencing this application is we have to, in some shape or form, demolish this duplex and convert it to a single family home. Next. So that's the new calculation of us being in excess after dedicating that Part 5 to the city. Next. 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 So I evaluated the options or, the process. We have to get a permit from the city. So here, Mitchell Herman, building inspector, has indicated that a permit will be required for construction to convert the building. This type of work is intensive, creating openings in walls, creating new partitions, HVAC, plumbing, capping, etc. And because it's through permit, I have to meet code. A property like this with its age, it's a can of worms, and I want to go through it. So let's go next. Next. So as it is today, the structures or the components of the home, down the left side, roof, trusses, attic, walls, floors, the major infrastructure of electrical, HVAC, plumbing, foundation. These are all, things we have to consider with the home and things that are going to have to change to conform to the building department. So if we go next, these are all the things that I have to change. I have to change walls. I have to open up floors. I have to remove and modify HVAC. I have to remove and modify plumbing. Again, we know the age of this home. These are outdated materials. These are outdated configurations, and it is intensive to change this stuff. You can't just simply replace a pipe. You got to open up the wall. You got to open up the floors to get at it. So I want to go through some pictures next. Just to really showcase, because I don't believe anybody here has actually gone through the property, which, is difficult because from a heritage point of view, does the interior influence decision-making or is it the exterior? I know it's all sort of intrinsically intertwined. However, because structure is so severe, I just really need to highlight this. So, for example, roof shingles are worn, maybe it's sloping a bit because of the foundation being adequate. Next. Here we can see on the top. Next. The attic, this is typical of an older construction where you have handmade trusses. However, insulation, energy efficiency, it's just not there. Next. no truss plates, etc. I mean, it's lasted this long, it's probably fine. However, moving forward into the future, for how much longer will it be safe? Especially with the amount of roof work that we have to do. You know, these are just things that we have to consider when we're adding up all the costs. Next. Example of truss plates to common code today. Next. This is the major part. This is the basement foundation, or rather the crawl space. It's uninsulated. It looks like a mess. It's inaccessible. The only way I was able to get this picture was by putting my arm through the hole. It's definitely unsafe. You can see 2x4s just covered in black, whether it's mold, rot, or whatever. That's what's essentially supporting the joists of the floor on dirt. Some of them have what appear to be footings, some do not. So definitely unacceptable, and I'll get to that in a minute through the structural engineer reports. Next. So the area that the foundation is on dirt is the entire front of the house, which I've marked out in red. Next. Next. So this is a typical example proper crawl space where you have insulated joists, you have proper footings with supports. Next. And it should look something like this. Yeah, of course, you'll run your utilities as well, but ours does not look like this. This you could actually crawl through and do the work. Ours you cannot. Next. I have a video clip here. We don't necessarily have to play it. Essentially, it's just a video of how sunken the floors are. So when I do take a step in the house, you can see the entire floor bow out. This isn't simply just ripping up a piece of plywood. It's throughout the entire main level. Next. So here, for example, on the picture on the left, we have a bar set down on the floor. You can see there's like a 3/4 inch gap. It's throughout the home. It's not something you can just repair. The entire floor has to be taken out. If you take out the whole floor, trim, walls, everything has to come out to get proper access. Even once you have it open, I need to get proper footings. I need to get proper foundation. So this is really crossing the threshold of repair versus replace. Again, to demolish and build new is where I'm going with this. So next. Again, this is just back to the basement front of the house as it relates to the back of the house. So next slide. Maybe it's not super clear from this angle, but that joist, for example, sits on top of a window. It doesn't have a lintel. So, you know, just today in today's code, that's just not proper. It's not structural. As soon as I open up a permit on this, that's going to be flagged. And it's just, again, a massive can of worms. It's just entirely inadequate. Next. Electrical, you know, fuse panel, it's an older home, it's to be expected. But with doing all this work, removing walls, removing floors, we're going to have to replace electrical outlets as well. If we have to get rid of the duplex component and remove existing kitchen features, stove outlets, etc., we're going to have to do rewiring. If we're doing rewiring, I got to open up walls. I got to go through studs. I got to do a ton of changes. Next. Plumbing, you know, we got galvanized, definitely something insurance doesn't like. So got to replace all that again to meet the permit, like Mitchell Herman had indicated, the inspector, I'd have to replace all that stuff. Next. And again, it runs through areas that are just definitely inaccessible. I can't expect a worker to go in here and work safely. I've also been told that. So the only option would be to rip up the floors to get proper access. It's just, anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I just want to make sure I get the message across. Next. The HVAC is an octopus. It runs through different units. It's insane. To reconfigure all this is just going to be a nightmare. Anyway, I don't want to get too into it. Next. Drywall or plaster, rather. This is lath and plaster. I can't confirm what date it was installed. I know asbestos was common between the 1920s and 1980s. So if I'm going to be ripping out floors, I'm going to be ripping out walls. Who knows the type of hazards that we're going to be exposing to. I got to do testing, but you know, whether it's demolition or repairs, obviously demolition is an easier way to go about it. Testing would still take place, but in terms of doing work in that environment, the safer option is full demolition and proper working environment. Next. So in summary, you know, costs, I've been trying to get costs from contractors. They look at it and they're scratching their heads. I've received numbers in the hundreds of thousands, ranging from 250 to 400, with clauses, including exclusions, because they just don't know what they're getting into. So until you start opening up, there's really no way to tell. But this is the cost range that I've been told, and it's definitely something for repairs that is not reasonable. And, you know, as this ties into its heritage implications, it just, you know, resolves that this needs to be demolished. Next. So Lauren had provided some comments highlighted or circled in blue under section 5.3.1 that demolition cannot be permitted unless it's demonstrated that the structure is not structurally sound and that rehabilitation is not viable. I hope these photos enforce this, but if that's not enough, if we go next, we've had 3 engineers from 2008 and so forth confirm structural inadequacy, poor building. Next. Floors are uneven, existing floor framing is deteriorating significantly, constant exposure to moisture in basement, ground floor framing structures in poor condition. Next. And decay in floor joists, particular concern. Next. So we got triple confirmation. A lot of these reports are 10 plus years old. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, there are tenants in the home. So to make these repairs with people living there, definitely not possible. When the property owner picked up this property, we inherited the tenants. This isn't a form of neglect on our part. It's just the context of the property, and it is what it is. We're dealing with it best we can. It's not structurally sound. It's not getting any better, and rehabilitation is not viable. Next. So this is just a little visual comparing repair to replacement. You know, if repairs was to be considered, which in my opinion it cannot be, we've got extreme cost, can of worms, unknown, unsafe, unrealistic, unusable. And from a permitting point of view, I got to conform to code. It's just not going to happen. So by replacing, let's do it right. Next. Oh, sorry. I put this in here. I like this train of thought, Ship of Theseus. Don't know how many of you have heard of this. The top left shows, you know, an old worn down boat, old sail, old planks, and, you know, maybe year by year, you replace a plank, you replace a sail. At the end of the day, you might have a new boat, but is it the same boat? Next. It's a common thought experiment of whether an object is the same object after having its original components replaced over time. I feel like this relates to our project very closely. Next. So I looked up the definition of identity, which is the sameness being compared to the original ship. Number 1 is the ship that maintains the same form as the original, that which persists through complete replacement of material. And then number 2, ship made of the same matter, stops being 100% the same when the first part is replaced. Well, as we know, number 2, things have changed in this house over the decades. So I believe number 1, by bringing in a new house with similar form, will be our best bet. Next. So in the spirit of the Ship of Theseus, this is what it would look like if we were to take the repair approach. Number 1 shows me opening up the walls on the inside. Number 2 shows me replacing the floors, rerunning the HVAC, rerunning the electrical, the plumbing, and then re-drywalling. The end product is different than the first product, but yet on the exterior, it appears the same. I don't think this is where our interests are. I think we can both agree that if we go to the next slide, that this is the better end result for everybody from a safety point of view, from a heritage point of view, etc. Next. So just touching on Lauren's comments, highlighted in green that the proposed new dwelling meets many of the criteria: 2-story in height, front gable, traditional proportions, materials in line with surrounding streetscape, and eclectic architectural character. We've really put a lot of care and effort into this because we just really want to make sure, you know, we don't want to set a precedent for demolition. We want to just take the most reasonable, safe, and proper action and path forward. So next. Here we have staff commenting on property as a contributing resource. This should be considered a non-contributing resource, but I believe this is where I can hand it off to Leah. Let's just see the next slide. Yes, so if Leah is able to speak to this, I'll let her take over.
Hello, everyone. I really haven't prepared a formal presentation this afternoon. Thank you for listening. I was employed by the owners, the present owners, to produce a heritage impact assessment for this property. And I assume that you have seen it. I don't know if you have as a committee. Hopefully you have. And, you know, I worked it through and came to approximately the same conclusion as the engineers, particularly Mark Schultz, came to in 2008. This house is being changed a great deal. You know, within a district, I understand interior features are not subject to any controls within a heritage conservation district, absolutely. But nonetheless, because of the issue of turning it back into a single dwelling, which is problematic in and of itself due to the changes to the Planning Act and the fact that you can have a second unit in a home without any rezoning as of right. That then what happens on the inside becomes an issue with what happens on the outside. The other issue, so I took it through. I understand that this was considered to be a contributing property. And so because I understood that, I felt, and I didn't have any understanding of how that decision came about. I understand that the Heritage Committee did something, but I don't know what they did. I don't know how formal that was. Certainly, there's nothing in the guidelines of the district or the district plan that deals with individual properties as to whether they're contributing or non-contributing. That I took it through a 906 analysis to see if it really was contributing. My conclusion is that it was not. And you can see that in my analysis in the Heritage Impact Assessment. I also, in terms of context, understood that the context had been altered considerably over time, and particularly with the severances next door and the approval of those buildings. Now the context of that building on the street is changed, and in fact, the streetscape changes with those two buildings, which you approved. In my opinion, this is not a contributing building. It may have some sort of contribution, association with the Muirs, but it's very, very, it's not close. It's not one of the Muir brothers. And there's a question about whether Mr. Muir even constructed this property. So from all of this, my decision or my opinion is that the building is not a contributing building. It's not a significant building. It's an unfortunate building. Over time, the exterior has changed. And because of all the changes that will have to go into the interior of this house to bring it back to a single dwelling, it really isn't valid to keep it if the costs are going to be considerable. And I think that we've worked with the guidelines. And as it stands, that building is not, it doesn't enhance the street anymore. And it hasn't for a long time. And so from my perspective, that the demolition should probably go ahead, and that a new building that's appropriate, that meets, as Lauren has said, most of the guidelines within the Heritage Conservation District guidelines with respect to design, that it really it would really be an enhancement of the streetscape to allow that building to be taken down. The other thing I'm from personal experience too, because I've lived in designated properties and renovated and restored designated properties in Ancaster and in Waterdown. When you start opening up this building, it's going to be interesting because there are always surprises, and it may be that the building simply won't stand the kind of heavy restoration or renovation that's required to bring it up to a single dwelling, because right now it can't exist as a single dwelling. It has to undergo those changes. It's unfortunate that after 2008, the owner at that time didn't bring it up to code. It really is. It would have helped. But anyway, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have with respect to my heritage impact assessment. But I certainly stand by it.
Lauren?
Brian, just a point of clarification. The contributing status in the Port Dalhousie HCD guidelines is the only criteria that it used is whether it was built before or after 1950. So because this was built before, under these guidelines, it's considered contributing, and that's the only criteria that we have to use.
Okay. Dr. Bergen.
I'm not quite clear on the age of the house. I believe it's quite old. I think I went through it back, 15 or 20 years ago. And it had, at that point, had a lot of architectural details that were still interesting and useful. But what is the actual date on the house?
From my look at this house, and I can go back to Mark Schultz again. I think this house is about 1880.
1880.
The oldest part of the house is about 1880. It doesn't go back beyond that. Those features, that staircase, and I admit that staircase is pretty impressive, is from the late 19th century. The back part, 20th century, there's nothing much. I don't know where they got the newel posts for the staircase at the back. I don't know if they got it from somewhere else, but there's nothing in the back that tells me that that it's earlier than 1920, 1930, which is confirmed by previous analyses that were done. But I'd say 1880, based on the design of that staircase and some of the trim that's left.
Thank you.
Okay.
But nonetheless, based on even if you don't allow for the demolition, the interior of that house is not on the table here. In a heritage conservation district, it's not the interior, so it may go anyway.
Lorraine?
Two questions. First of all, the first speaker mentioned when the owner picked up the house, they inherited the tenants. When did the owner buy the house?
2022, is it not, Dylan?
Yeah, that's right. 2022. So a couple of years ago.
So
That's
the
the
owner would have purchased the house knowing it had these issues then. fairly recent purchase?
Recent purchase, yes, but knowledge of the issues within the home, limited, visually by belongings. But in terms of these reports, for example, the Schultz report, I didn't get that, I think, from Lauren, gosh, a month or two ago, I think.
But did have some that were older, 2008, etc. Were they must have been given to the owner when the
Oh,
owner purchased the house.
no, that's what I mean. Lauren was able to provide those to me through the public records. Those were not given to us by the seller.
Okay, so that was my first question. And the second question is there, if a demolition is approved, is there any intention? Lee said, interior doesn't count, but to us, it's still important. Is there any intention of using any of the pieces from the house in a new build?
So I can answer to that. So even we have to apply for a building permit. If you were to, how would you say, to try to renovate the home. And the staircase wouldn't comply with today's code, first of all. It'd be unsafe. The steps are too small. And the requirement there is drastic. I also want to get back to the other question because I was involved in the second part. We bought it in 2022. At the time when we first purchased it, we weren't allowed to go through the front unit. The tenant didn't let us go through it. And we just had the same thing on, we bought a property on Facer Street and we weren't able to go through 3 of the 6 units. A lot of times you just can't do it. Tenants don't have to allow you access. We, since then, evicted the tenant for non-payment of rent, but we did not get rent for, I think, 8 to 10 months. And it took us 8 to 10 months to evict them as well. So the process isn't as simple as just going through the property. You don't have necessarily the right to go through the property by giving 24 hours notice that the tenant doesn't let you through. Or you just can't barge in the house. It's their home. And in Niagara, you really don't have options for that. So it's not as simple as that. And the home was also, I didn't know that at the time, it was kept vacant for quite a long period of time in between the purchase of, and to answer Leah's question, the reason why the home in 2008 was not restored is because a homeowner died eventually. It was Tom Arbeck who had it. And it wasn't a proposal for demolition. And I'll explain that when I do my presentation. It was a proposal for an apartment building. And I have David Webb's report. But that's why, like the staircase, if somebody wanted it and we demolish the house, you can take it and use it for whatever you want, but you won't be able to use it. I don't think it would comply. I may be wrong, but I can't see how.
So for my question, I didn't mean, take an existing structure from the house. I meant any of the materials. Are any of the materials reusable?
If somebody wants to use it on another property, maybe.
Not your property?
Well, you need a building permit.
Well, if you got a demolition in the building permit, I'm just wondering if
you
any
may be able to use flooring, like, for example, like if you had a plank that was a floor used for flooring upstairs, you might be able to use that on one of the floors because that one, but anything that's structural or has a building code requirement, definitely not. But maybe like a plank, maybe a piece of trim, maybe like something that does not require a parameter that states this is the regulation that you need or the minimal standard.
Just thinking, if it was a heritage property, there might be something that is of the past that could be used in the house.
Yeah, you may be able to use some of the flooring if you're able. It depends how it was nailed on or screwed on, or whether it was glued on. So we wouldn't know until you start taking stuff out. And we could look at that, trying to save some stuff, or providing access to whoever wanted to utilize that for their home.
Actually made the recommendation that we could do that. And also might be able to use the newel posts, which are there. So I did make a recommendation for that. If it couldn't be used in the home, then it would be offered to other people and salvaged. Anything that original that could be salvaged, rather than just thrown in the, in the dump, because people could use it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was thinking when I saw some of the interior shots. There were some nice looking wide baseboards and corner blocks and things like that. And you're talking about the newel posts. I mean, if you're in a heritage district, it would be nice if some of those elements could be retained in the home. So there's, for the new owners, the new occupants, there would be kind of a sense of continuity. There's that, you know, contact with the past, so to speak.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't have to, worry about, saving structural elements, but some of the trim and things, it would be nice if they could be utilized.
I agree, Brian.
Dr. Bergen.
Okay, yes, this is my old rant. I don't think there's a house in Port Dalhousie over 100 years old that I couldn't find a number of planners and inspectors and engineers and architects to condemn them because they are difficult. Owning an old house is a work in progress. And it's really simple to find Port Dalhousie where there's a nice lot, maybe it overlooks some water, or maybe it has a nice yard. You level the house, and then you have a nice building lot, and you can build a nice new modern house that complies with all code, everything else. But most of the old houses in Port, if that's our feeling, if a house that doesn't meet code should be leveled, then I think we should level most of the houses in Port and build nice new modern houses. Pardon me, I'm getting a bit ranty here, but I live in a house that was built in 1840. My father-in-law was a builder, and he helped restore it and build onto it. And he said, if it were up to me, I would level this house. I said, well, let's not level it. I think this is a great house. And over the years, and I've had it for about 40 years now, so the house is 1840 post and beam construction. We have all new walls on the outside. We have new windows. I've replaced the roof twice. The furnace, we have a new furnace with new ducts. I put in a new basement a couple of years ago, and we now have a nice new electrical panel. This was not simple. This was not cheap. It wasn't easy, but it preserved the house. And I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
If I can answer to that, like we're not saying all houses should be demolished. And as you know, David, I own 333 Main Street, and I voluntarily designated that property heritage, the Blakey House. Right? We applied for demolition. Margaret called me and said, "Why don't you reconsider?" And I did. So we're not saying all houses. I kept the Blakey House, which has significance, and I designated heritage voluntarily. Right? I'd like to get back because I think when you go back, there's far more to this property than what you see here. This goes back to 2008. So in 2008, I can't remember who the gentleman that spoke. He was present. I remember him being there. Myself, Kevin Bozowski, Paul Chapman, and I believe John Flynn might have been there as well. One of the Flynns might have been there as well. John Flynn might have been there as well. So the application was not for demolition. It was to build an apartment building. And I don't know if anybody remembers that. So Tom Arbeck had come up with a design to build an apartment building, demolishing 121 and 115. 121, and I don't know, David, if you read David Webb's report that he wrote. Did you have a chance to read that?
No.
Okay, it's very interesting because I'll read you excerpts from it. So David Webb went through it, and we all went through it. And at the time, we thought that 115 should be demolished. We also thought that 121 should be demolished. I was not the owner. The reason I got brought into it is because I owned 144 Dalhousie. I purchased it in 2005. It was designated to be heritage, and we applied to get it demolished. I needed a significant renovation and a building permit required. And we thought that we would get involved with all three properties and went through all the properties and make a decision. What was interesting was that 121 was deemed to be viable. 115, and I'll read you the expert, and this is what people fail to realize. This is from David Webb. The property is comprised of 3 apartments, a front apartment, a rear apartment, and a side apartment of a single wing story. Right? And at his final report, David says, the detached garage at 121 and the single story addition at 115 appear to be modern without visible significant heritage value. That's what David said in his final report's conclusion. So they were okay to demolish basically. At the time, it was a project. There was 2 properties to build primary, and they couldn't demolish the second one, so they dropped it. In the same time, Tom got sick, and he ended up dying of cancer. The property got dilapidated for a while. Nobody took care of it, and I don't believe anybody's been through it from the committee for 17 years. Unless if somebody has, then I might be wrong. They're not going through it. What happened? So 144 Dalhousie also does not get demolished. It gets deemed to be of value. We put the demolition, we have to apply for a building permit. We cannot get anybody to go underneath the property, like Dylan pointed out, because it's an unsafe working condition. Now you have to abide by the labor board. What do they have to do? Put a foundation underneath it, remove all the structure that's there, because you have to abide by the labor board. Regardless of what you say, when you do your renovation in your home, you do it without a permit. Once you apply for a permit, the city of St. Catharines controls the application. The labor board controls the people. 121 Main Street, they have a report to demolish. It's unsafe. They start the renovation to the property next door. The building department of St. Catharines stops the work and says this property is unsafe. After the Heritage Committee had approved or had denied Alan McLean's application to demolish. What do they have to do? Bring engineers who reiterated what Schultz and the past engineer said. They had to underpin the foundation, remove the whole structure. If you look at 121 Main Street, there is literally 6 feet of wall left. It's not even the property that was there before, not even the property that was approved by the Heritage Committee for the design. Because why? Because you can't restore that house. This house was said to be twice as worse condition as 121 Main. So if you look at the pictures of what 121 Main used to look like and what it looks like today, you can't, it's not the same property. So what did we save? 115 is even worse. It's way worse. And how, and this is what I found very interesting. When you look at the conclusion of the city planner stipulating that although it may be difficult to change it from a double dwelling, it's not impossible. I think you need to go underneath the basement to say that, and then nobody has. They actually demolished the 3rd story already, the 3rd dwelling, because there used to be 3 dwellings. 121 Main Street was a 3-dwelling unit. The 3rd dwelling was demolished since 2008. I don't know who did it or when it was done, but it was way before my time. And now, to convert the duplex to a single story that requires a permit, how do you get into the basement? You have to apply for a permit. And I don't see how you restore this. I don't see how you physically can. And I don't see how you can write a comment that stipulates that it's not impossible. Yeah, it is impossible. It is impossible. You're going to demolish it down. Once you start to work and remove the floors, you're going to have nothing left of that property that was there because it's so convoluted. You have literally a height of 3 feet under that basement. How are you going to get people to work there? Because you have to convert it back to a single family home.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, and I'm not a heritage planner. I'm not a structural engineer. And that's why we hire those people. But I was involved in 144 Dalhousie, and my partner who passed away, Tony Salvatore, said, you cannot get underneath it. The labor board won't allow you. And they didn't. And they put a whole new foundation in. And now you go drive by 144 Dalhousie and you look at the picture of 144 Dalhousie, nothing like what it used to look like. Same with 121. You look at the picture of 121 Main Street and what it looked like 6 years ago and what it is today, there's nothing there left, not even a single window. And I don't see how you save this property. And that's basically what I have to say. I can't attest for the heritage requirements. That's why we hired somebody. I can't attest to the structural requirements, but I can attest from my past experience that you're not going underneath that basement. Absolutely not. Not with a building permit, you're not. The city won't inspect it.
Mark, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, a comment and question. One, I'm wondering what makes 3 feet unsafe working conditions. I have the very similar basement, and
Not sure.
unfortunately, I have to be in there all the time.
Taking out a building permit, I guess.
What's that?
When you take out a building permit, you need to deal with the Ministry of Labor.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if you take up the floors, what would be the issue to get into the basement with the labor board, and
But
and
did you see with the pictures Dylan put? The trusses are hanging on a windowsill. You take out the floor, that whole place collapses.
you know, the boards, just like
Right, so
just for
the board, you
access.
remove the boards, there's no support under there. You don't have a proper foundation. You don't have a header. You have a piece of wood on top of a windowsill that's been glued on or nailed on. You start removing that, you still have to put in lentils. You still have to remove those wood floors. You cannot. So the city isn't going to go through and say, oh, we're going to let you take out the floors, go underneath there, but not replace the joists. It doesn't comply. When you take a building permit out, it's
So
a
you've
drastic.
asked the city, and they won't. They
So
refuse to check it
my
out, is what you're saying?
my question to you would be this: and if you want to find out the real answer, right? Because in St. Catharines, anything that requires a renovation requires a building permit, as minimal as removing a floor. That requires a building permit, technically. Apply for a building permit, and you can see the process. I did it. The building department gets involved and won't do inspections there.
So is it me,
No.
or is Leo breaking up?
I might be.
Breaking up.
Yeah, like once you apply for a building permit, you would have to call one of the city inspectors to go through the property. They are not going to go in a 3-foot basement underneath.
And to cut a hole in for access, they still won't. Like
Well, you have to
asked
replace the
refused?
joist.
The city has refused. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, not the city. You're dealing with the labor board. It's no different than if you're working at GM and you don't wear a glove or a glasses. You don't have to now you wear glasses. It could still be safe, but that's the requirement. There's requirements you have to abide by under the labor board. If we want to change those laws just for this house, we probably could and go through the whole process and take 50 years. But what
Okay,
I'm
so the
saying
labor
is
board has refused to go down there to inspect it. That's what you're saying.
at 144 Main Street, they cannot. It's not safe for them. I had a flood. I had a flood on my property at 557 Point Avenue when the big ice storm happened, which is a house built in 1920 in Crystal Beach. And we had 3 contractors that would not go through because they wanted to take out building permits, so I had to do it myself.
All right.
So here we can't do it ourselves. So when you involve the building department, their first priority is their own safety. Their second priority is public safety. Like when they come and do an inspection to my roof, I provide a ladder, I put it up, it has to be bolted in, it has to be in a safe environment, and then they will go up the ladder. They just don't say, oh, I'm going to go up on any ladder. They have requirements, and that's the difference when you apply for a building permit. When you do renovations on your own home that's heritage, hey, we done them at 333 Main Street. We painted it, we did flooring, we did everything, right? But when you require a building permit, the ball game changes. And I can guarantee you that 99% of all renovations done in the Heritage District interior, when they remove walls or remove floors, are done without a permit. If you have to do a permit, you got to meet current code or an upgraded code.
So
and you won't meet it.
So
Like
you've asked,
even the steps of a staircase, you need 7/8 for your foot landing, right? You don't have 7/8. But if you change the staircase, you can't get the stair to fit. So now you got to cut a hole in the floor to angle it even more so you can fit 7/8 risers. Because you got to meet the curve, you got to meet the building code. And that's the problem with renovating heritage properties with a building permit.
well, in any property, I know if even though it's not heritage, I know many contractors because I'm a contractor as well. And there was a job that we were too busy to do, and I got someone else to do the exact same thing that you have an issue with in that basement. It was very small. Poured, dug holes, poured footings, jacked up the house, and even in the second floor, it was a big dip, and they corrected it all. So
Where was that property located?
that was in Port Weller.
Okay, and permits were taken out, right?
It must have.
So when you do a renovation like that, you would have to meet the current codes. When Dylan shows you the picture, you have a piece of log, because it's not even a beam, it's a log from like a tree sitting on top of the window sill. What are you going to jack up? You jack that up, everything falls down.
Yeah, who knows? You never know
Oh
with
no, I know. When you don't have a sill and you jack something up, that's falling down. The house falls down. So you would have to remove everything. So
Oh yeah, you put in temporary sills where you need to, or headers, or
no, you do what we had to
support,
do in
right?
140. You do what we had to do in 144 Delusians, pour a new foundation and underpin it. Very similar to what they had to do on 121 Main Street. And then eventually you don't even have a house that's there. The house that's there doesn't look like anything like it because you can't keep it. So why not just build it brand new if it's this dilapidated? Hey, I didn't tear down 333 Main Street. I saw value in it. I could have torn down a heritage house and gone to the board. And I didn't because I thought I had value. I'm saying this property is unsafe to live. I wouldn't put my daughter, I would never expect you to put the daughter in.
No, so you don't have, there's no tenants in there right now, you're saying?
We're sure. We have tenants that didn't pay us forever. We tried to evict them, and it took us 8 to 10 months to get them out. And we're going to have to evict the tenant in the back. Now, the back part is relatively better than the front part, but the back part has no heritage significance as per the report that David Webb did. David Webb prepared a report and it stipulated that, and I read it to you. That's the original report that was based on. That used to be a triplex, not a duplex. So they already removed part of the property. So you lost heritage significance there already. The back part is said to have no heritage significance. So what are you left with? What are you renovating? 400 square feet? So I'm saying, why not just build something brand new and make it look old?
And you said there's no tenants in the front part, right? Is that what you're saying?
We evicted them, yes. They didn't pay rent for, I think, 8 to 10 months. And in Niagara, it's impossible to kick out tenants that don't pay rent.
Yeah, it's tough in not just Niagara.
Well, Toronto a little easier, but you're right. It's tough everywhere. It's tough everywhere. You're absolutely right. But yeah, like I'm not saying that, and I don't want to say tear down every heritage building because that's not what I'm saying. Look, I owned 160 St. Paul. I owned 174 St. Paul. I owned 176 St. Paul, built in the 1860s. We spent millions in the restoration. Millions. We didn't tear them down. And we could have at the time. There was no heritage thing. We didn't. We spent millions in restoration. So I'm not anti-heritage. I'm anti-waste.
Right.
And we spend millions on those properties. And if you look at them right now, you go look at 176 St. Paul, 174 St. Paul, and 168. They are the 3 best looking properties in downtown St. Catharines by far. Bolite, Subway, and Halo. Insane how good they look.
I believe it.
Yeah, they look great. But like I said, this property, you can't save it. Just can't. But thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew?
I've got a couple of comments, but to not bury the lead, I think that when you renovate to preserve something, enough has to be preserved to justify the work and the cost. And I don't generally like demolition, but I think this is a case where it's very hard to, what's being saved, it's very hard to justify the cost and the work that would have to go into it to do it. If this was this more significant house, I would say then the $250,000 to $400,000 is a bargain. In this case, I don't think that it is. So I tend to favor the application at this point, and I came into this meeting with mixed feelings. I do, though, have a couple of reservations about some of your points because I'm wary of creating precedents, because what I would hate to see is to have a case where a more significant building was facing a demolition permit with facing less troubles based on some of these these points. And I do want to make one point as well about the reason this house is facing demolition is because it's been neglected. And your point is valid. It was not neglected by the current ownership. But when you purchase a property, you assume responsibility for the sins of the previous owners. And the comment was made, well, we had limited knowledge of the problems. That's a failure of due diligence. That's your responsibility. I had a case where there was a property I liked. I was ready to make an offer on it. The guy said, yeah, but we're not doing any showings right now. You can't walk through it. I walked away before he finished the sentence. You know what I mean? You chose to buy the property with a lack of knowledge. That's on you. Having said that, that doesn't change my overall reaction, my overall position. I also think that one of the things I'm concerned about is the conformity issue as well. It's not really relevant to the heritage aspects. You know, properties are not typically torn down because they don't conform with zoning bylaws that were passed well after they were built. So that one's kind of moot. But I also think something that was important that is raised is not really a factor in making a decision, but it's an important conversation for people in the heritage community to be having, which is the point about the challenges to restoring a historic property that are presented by the permitting process as it is now. It's a very important topic, and it's something that I personally am dealing with and have dealt with, and I think that's something that the heritage communities have to look at in general. So I appreciate you raising that as part of this conversation. So I saw the comment in the chat that we've covered a lot of this. So I'm going to say I personally am in favor of the permit, and if no one else has any things that we should really think about moving to a vote, I'm interested to see where everyone falls on this.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. If we don't have any other questions or comments about the proposal, then I guess, yes, we should move, to recommend the approval of the demolition and the new construction. I wonder if we could add something to the motion about retention of some of the interior, like trim and things like that. If possible, rather than just having everything end up in a dumpster. It would be nice if, some of that interior, trim and stuff and newel posts could be saved.
Yeah.
Lorraine,
What?
you've got
I wonder if we could add anything to the motion that really lays out why, in this case, some of us would be willing to support this so that it doesn't become a precedent setting. I really agree with what Andrew said and what I tried to say as well. You buy a house and it's an older house and you bought it a couple years ago, you could walk around it probably and see a lot of that. So I'm worried about that kind of thing happening. And it has happened to us before where people have come to us after having just bought the house and wanting to demolish it. So I don't know if that part can be put in. I doubt it, but at least if we are more specific about why we're approving this one as opposed to some other demolitions, then I would be more likely to vote for it.
good point. And Mark, you've got a question, comment?
Yeah, is this just for the demolition? We're voting both on the proposed new construction and demolition?
Yeah, they're both submitted together
Okay,
in
and
one application.
The other two units that are going to be built, we're not.
Those are previously approved
That's it.
and have a heritage permit. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Dr. Bergen?
This is just an apocryphal story, but I had not totally apocryphal. I had a 16-year-old daughter. She's now 47. And when she was 16, if I wanted her to do something and she didn't want to do it, there was no way in the world she could do it. She could just come up with a million reasons that this couldn't be done. It was impossible to do it. Any rational person would understand this. If she wanted to do it, I couldn't stop her. And I think we're looking at something like this right now. I think that this is one where certainly, there are a million reasons that this can't be done, but if there's somebody there that really wanted to do it, it could be done. So anyhow, end of thought.
Okay, thanks.
So for retaining and reusing materials, how should that language? How are you thinking?
Should
Options
be
to
encouraged. Is that enough? Strong
Yeah.
enough? Should be encouraged.
Yeah.
There
Investigated.
was a recommendation for that in the HIA, and what I would,
Mhm.
one way you could phrase this is just to say, based on the commitment of ownership to accept that recommendation, because the recommendation basically says utilize it if possible or make it available if not, and that pretty much is the point.
Is that from Miss
Like-
Wallace? Miss Wallace?
Yeah, yeah. And if the owner were to commit to either, to making available anything that wasn't used, I would be happier with
Yeah.
I'll get that language. Yeah.
And is it due to demonstrated structural deficiencies that make it impossible? Is that too strong? Like the idea that anybody could come and say they have structural deficiencies, and we're going to say the same thing to them, is that, you know what? Give it, you bought it as it is, you try and fix it. Give it a try first, but they've tried to prove to us, or they have proved to us perhaps, that it's totally beyond repair. So I don't know that demonstrated structural deficiencies is strong enough wording.
Can I just
Yeah, Lauren?
Yeah.
through the chair? Yeah, I think that the HCD policies, they require the applicant or the owner to demonstrate to the committee and to council. So I think that, I mean, impossible is a really strong word.
Yes, yeah, it is.
but have demonstrated to the committee and shown you, and that's what this is what you're moving towards, that's the decision that you've made. I don't know if proven is the right word, but I think
Well,
demonstrated. Yeah.
they had, of course, that could come from anybody. I was going to say that, the idea that they had documents that
Mhm.
explained it.
If I may, through the chair, I definitely want to relate to the importance of not saying the precedent. And I know Andrew had kind of mentioned the whole aspect of the non-conformity may not relate, but that may be something you may want to incorporate, not just limited to structural deficiencies like David had mentioned. Anyone can get a report. I mean, I don't 100% agree with that, but in our case, not only is it structural deficiencies, but what would really set this apart from anyone mimicking or using this as an example is we have to convert from duplex to single family. And I think that's a very strong reason. And up to you if you want to incorporate it or not. But anyway, just wanted to throw it out there.
I don't see that's strong. Going from duplex to single family. My in-laws did that, and it was not a problem. In an old house, like that to me wasn't really the issue. Going from duplex to single family, I think that happens often. Like I said, my in-laws did it without any issue at all in an old house. So I don't think that, for me, that doesn't do it.
Mark, I think you had a question first.
A comment, and it's just related to the proposed Heritage Conservation District downtown and the feedback we got from a lot of the business owners and building owners in the downtown. A lot of them were saying that their buildings aren't worth being saved. And like, even if there was an HCD, they would fight to have their buildings torn down or say that it's too expensive to fix. So I'm wondering where we kind of go with that in mind too, in a heritage district. Like we could, like there was a number of people that just said that their buildings are too structurally unsound to do anything with. what would be stopping them from tearing those down? And just like this one too. I don't know. It's just a comment I have.
I can answer to that, like, especially with Tammy being your planner, and it would help out a lot if we had that when we did our renovations, because with commercial buildings, you can apply for leniency under the building code for existing structures. For example, if you have two steps going into the front like we did, but it comes to interpretation of who in the city is interpreting that. And that's the issue. If you have to meet current codes for requirements, it is tough. It's also tough to get insurance with heritage properties that are commercially zoned. It's also tough to get financing. You get, instead of getting 75% financing, I think we got 55%. So that is not an invalid point. It does make it harder, but it also comes down to how the city interprets the building permit applications for commercial. So that falls on the building department and the planning department as well.
Andrew, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, I just want to respond to something that Leo said there. Because this is going out and it's a matter of public record, I want to push back a little bit on the notion that heritage properties have higher costs for insurance and so on. Every insurance person I've dealt with, it's about age and condition of the property. The heritage designation or the heritage district has nothing to do with insurance and so on. That's a bit of misinformation that's been kicked around by some of the naysayers. It's simply not true in my experience and based on pretty much anyone I talk to who works in the realm. So I want to just make sure that the alternate perspective is on the record with that, because I don't agree with that.
So is this the motion that we're going to try to go with then?
I think I've been working on it. Okay, how do people feel about this? Any questions, comments, concerns?
What do we think of that then?
Through the chair, I I approve of this motion, but we're also trying to pass the reconstruction.
Oh yeah.
Do we have any detail? Do we have any details on the proposed rebuild? Like, it looks like it's going to be a brick structure. Is that true?
That's the old one.
Yeah, through the chair, the applicant here, we included the floor plans elevations or I think Leah made reference to it in the HIA.
And it actually looks reasonably close to the existing house, I think, the plan. So the plan, that was your argument, and that one I agree with, that it did look similar. I could see where you had made an effort to make it look similar. And you had the comparison. There was the comparison slide where you had the comparison of was it this one?
Yeah, I agree. It's very similar, and I like the design. So
Yeah, I think so too. It's not exact, but it's fairly close, I think.
It's not a bad looking design.
Yeah, I agree. I like the replacement idea. But back to the motion, Lauren, reasonable is so subjective.
Yeah.
A reasonable cost and I would take that part out. The exceed every
So
I don't it's maybe I'm
that just
trying
good?
to. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad motion.
I think that covers everything.
Okay, so we're happy with this motion. Rachel?
I think Dr. Bergen had his hand up before me.
Oh, did he? Dr. Bergen?
Good. I think that I would throw in something due to the, and I'm not going to approve it, but the very significant structural deficiencies. Structural deficiencies, that's a weasel word that if I bought another property and I hired the right planners and got Schultz and company to write reports that it wasn't good, I'd say, well, you approved this because of structural deficiencies. I am now demonstrating through my paperwork the structural deficiencies here, so the house should come down so I can put up my nice, modern, compliant house. So I would put in something about very significant structural deficiencies.
Rachel?
I just wanted to point out in terms of fleshing out this motion that I thought Lauren had very good wording in one of the attachments we had to the meeting around the proposed demolition being justified with strong evidence that it can't be feasibly rehabilitated. I know, Lauren, you have access to that. I don't know what people think about that. It's a bit stronger than that, saying that the strong evidence presented justified the decision. I thought it was really well worded, Lauren, and my recommendation would be to use that or words to that effect.
I don't have that open right now, but I thank you for pulling it up for me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't copy paste because I have it open on a separate computer, so I'm so sorry. I don't know if anyone else is able to do that in the chat or something, but it just says any proposed demolition must be justified with strong evidence that the building is not structurally sound and cannot be feasibly rehabilitated.
I found it. I can copy it.
Yeah, sorry to dictate you like we're in to you like we're in the 50s or something.
Oh no, I think this is fine. I think it works. Okay, so due to
I can put it in the chat if you want the exact wording I had. I could come up with the chat. Where's my chat?
Strong evidence.
Where's my chat? Oh, there. Okay, I put it in the chat.
Strong evidence that the building is not structurally sound and cannot be feasibly rehabilitated. Okay, perfect. Okay, so do people, people prefer the strong evidence language or the demonstrated structural deficiencies language?
Or both.
Or both. Yeah, okay. Yeah, do they and there you go. Perfect.
That's good.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, that's the way.
That's great.
Okay. So are we happy with this motion now? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
I think I would turn the first and into a with.
Okay. Yeah, that reads better.
Yeah, I can live with that.
Ever the editor.
Okay. Well, so there's the motion. Does somebody wish to make that motion? Andrew? Thank you. And all in favor of the said motion? Did that pass? I think it did.
3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. And yourself,
Okay.
7. Oh.
I guess it passed then.
Yeah. If you want to do it one more time, can you see now, Brian?
Yeah.
If I turned off. Okay. Yeah. Try everyone just one more time, just so we can confirm.
6, 7, 7. Yep. And John Crawley, 8. Okay. I guess it's done.
Yeah. All right. So thank you everyone who's joined us. We're going to take this. I'll be in touch tomorrow, but we're going to take this to council. Let you know the next steps in the process. And
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank
time,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
Can
moving
I
on
ask
to.
a quick procedural question there?
Yep, go ahead.
It looked to me that there were 2 nays on that vote. Am I correct about that?
It was what, Dr. Bergen and
Mark,
Mark.
You were against?
I was against.
Yeah, only because I know that it's possible, just because I've seen it done so many times, and that's just the wording that I couldn't. That's all.
I asked because I wanted clarity on what the vote was, and I wanted to again request that the vote be recorded. I think it's important when these things go to council that they see if it's not unanimous, that if there's dissent, it should be something that information is available to them.
Okay.
Yep, Lauren.
Through the chair, we'll figure out a way of doing that in the minutes that isn't because we were previously recording every single vote, and clerks asked us not to do that. But I think in this case it is important.
Yeah, just as long as it's somewhere.
Okay.
Because in the past, sometimes that information's gotten lost, and we've had a 5-4 vote, and it's gone. It's just written as having been approved, and I favor having some documentation of that.
We'll make sure it's in the minutes, definitely.
Hey, even if you just say 8-2 or something like that.
Yeah, and through the chair, I think in the past what we've done in these is we have said, the vote was 8-2, and here's the motion that was passed or was opposed. We won't name people's names in the report, in the council report, but because clerks doesn't want us to do that, but we'll be able to put what the vote actually was.
So there's no wall of shame or anything then.
No, exactly.
Okay. Item 7.3, the downtown HCD study. We'll take it away, James.
Yeah, so through the chair. So last month we had our consultants joining us, and they gave a really good presentation on the findings in the Heritage District study. At the time, though, there was a lot to digest. It's a huge report. They tried to distill it into kind of a digestible, portion, but it was a lot still for the committee to be able to chime in on. And so essentially what the committee decided was to defer making a motion to this month. And I think today what we'll hopefully be able to have in the time that we have left is a discussion about what that motion looks like. Because I think there's probably a desire from the committee to make sure that they're providing council with a strong motion on their feelings on the Heritage District study. So this is going to be going to council in early June. So this is whatever motion is made here today will go into the staff report that will be brought to council for that June meeting. So there's kind of, I don't know if anybody had given a lot of thought to what the motion should look like, but Lauren and I, in talking about it, had kind of 5 key kind of issues we wanted to sort of bring up and get the committee to chime in on. But maybe we'll just open the floor to start and then kind of go from there. And looks like Lorraine maybe wants to chime in first.
I had a question for you, James. Remember I had asked at the last meeting for some indication of which properties in the index were in which of the 3 sub areas. It didn't say it in the minutes, but I did request that, and I think there was some line in the minute that kind of showed that there was going to be some indication, but I didn't see it. I went back and I couldn't see it, even just as recently as yesterday, where it showed what division they were in, what sub area.
Yeah,
was that not possible?
It hasn't been done yet. We're hoping that it'll be able to be incorporated into the final. But in the 4 weeks or 3 and a bit weeks that we've had since the meeting, they just haven't had a chance to do that work because it's 450 properties, and they're having to make sure that it's compiled properly and looks properly and all that stuff. It's a little more complicated than just adding a line sometimes to each page. So unfortunately, no, sorry, Lorraine, we don't have that information right now.
That's okay. I just wondered, and in the future would be good. One of the reasons why I wanted to see that is because I had mentioned in the meeting that I was surprised, although I have since, found out that's normal, to see parking lots, sheds, empty lawns. And I just wondered again, Okay, so do you anticipate that that will be a question or an issue or a concern in a potential heritage, district designation? I think the people who are already unhappy with the concept might find that off-putting.
Yeah, through the chair. Typically, how it would work is obviously if it's a parking lot, there's probably little to no heritage value there. And so the reason those are typically though still included in a heritage district would be for what comes next. So, for example, in Port Dalhousie, if we have an empty lot, there are guidelines that provide us with kind of, guidance for what the next building should look like to make sure that it fits the character of that area, right? So as much as a parking lot we don't anticipate would have any sort of heritage concerns from that perspective, what comes after, that's where the guidelines and the plan would play a part. So it is still sort of important to include those properties within certain boundaries, especially if, let's say it's a property on St. Paul Street, right? Where we know there's a parking lot right beside right where the curve is, right? In St. Paul, right beside the Pizza there, right? And what goes in there obviously would be very important in terms of how we'd want it to look, what the guidelines would look like and stuff like that. So that parking lot wouldn't be excluded. It would just be named a non-contributing property essentially.
And I know I asked you that before, and so I hate to be repetitive, but I
That's
guess
okay.
my worry is that that would be something that people would seize as an issue. I know that when I discussed it with sort of immediate friends, they were very surprised at that. So my recommendation to you, as such a major player with this, is that you think about how you could be proactive in including that kind of thing in any kind of a description, explaining just what you explained to me.
Yeah, through the chair, it is interesting. The contributing versus non-contributing status is something that some people have difficulty kind of wrapping their heads around because it is still technically in a heritage district. And so they think, well, how can I be in a heritage district but not be kind of abiding by the same rules as everyone else? So
Right.
it is really complicated. We try our best, and our report will talk about contributing versus non-contributing.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks, Lorraine. I appreciate the feedback.
I would just really recommend that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if I'm not sure if anybody else had any kind of thoughts that they wanted to lead with, but I think the overarching kind of theme is the findings found that the entire heritage district or the study area merited being a heritage district. It meets the criteria under the Heritage Act. I believe it's low 50% of the properties are contributing, and actually only 25% need to be. So it far exceeds the minimum. So I guess the first motion or the first part of our motion that we'd want to have the committee chime in on is, do you feel that this should be a heritage district essentially? So I'll open the floor and let you chat about that. Mark? Sorry.
Yeah, I believe so. It's very significant. I mean, very unique downtown. That's for sure. People have been using it as film site as well for that reason. It's very attractive. We are talking about the entire down, not just one pocket, right?
Yeah, I think first off, what we'd want to talk about is kind of the whole study area, just to get your thoughts on the whole study area. We can zoom in on things like St. Paul Street after this, but I think we'd want a recommendation from the committee on whether or not the entire area merits being a heritage district, from the committee's point of view. And then from there, if we want, we can kind of drill in on specific areas. I imagine this group would want to chime in on St. Paul Street and let council know how they feel about St. Paul in particular. And I think from a staff perspective, we would appreciate getting your feedback on something like St. Paul Street, right? So yeah.
Okay. Then, having said that, I think the entire district, that the proposed, there's so many beautiful buildings sprinkled in there, even though it's just, like you said, about 50%. And the thing is, what I'd like to see too is that the entire heritage district, but also like little pockets. Like I know that you had it separate. There was a proposed idea, a proposed plan for having different pockets, but if the entire thing was a heritage district with like a separate pockets within it that are not separate, but maybe like a lot of downtowns have like that's that area, that's that area. It's not just like one big one. Do you know what I mean right now? Am I getting this point across?
Do you mean the three sub areas, Mark?
Yeah.
There's the three sub areas.
I think to have that incorporated into the bigger plan, but not separate from it, but maybe just separate from like an outline, or maybe like signage to say that this is this area, this is this area, but still incorporate the entire heritage district. I think it would just be that would be a little more unique too, right?
So would your recommendation be that the whole thing be happen at the same time, the whole area?
Yeah, when not necessarily separate, just maybe on paper, or just
I think that was one of the options in the survey.
Yeah, and just not in stages. I think there should be another option in that, right? Where different areas are named, but it's still one heritage district.
Yeah, through the chair, I think the way it would work is if this were to get to the plan stage where they would actually come up with guidelines for the downtown, those sub areas, because they do have kind of they're pointed out because they have unique qualities, right? And so those areas potentially would have different basically guidelines, essentially. And there are other heritage districts across the province. One that I know really well is the St. Lawrence district in Toronto, which is actually like 6 or 7 separate sub areas all within one, and each area has its own kind of guidelines, essentially. So we could potentially, if we got to the plan stage, you could go that route. And if it helps to remind everybody what those sub areas were, I'll pull that up on my screen, or maybe Lauren has it handy as well. I know I have it here somewhere. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. Is there a way to just have this same guidelines, where they're just named, like the sub areas are just named? There's 3 sub areas, right? So I don't want to create any more costs or work to have a bunch of different guidelines, right? Have the same guidelines, but have the different sub areas. It wasn't a proposed idea. No, I think that would be
it's almost like a branding exercise for each area, essentially, right? Like it might be in terms of, policies might not change, but you mean maybe there's different signage or something for the street signs in that area or something like that, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Okay, so I'm probably on my own island here. Oh, sorry, Maria. Sorry, I had to go. I'm probably on my own island here, but I thought that if the St. Paul Street area was the first sub area and it proved really successful, that would encourage the Civic Center sub area and the Church Street South sub area to also become sub areas. Like I saw the whole thing as the study area being a heritage area, but I wondered if one went first, and this could be very faulty reasoning. It's just what I was thinking. I'm going to blame it on my concussion. So if anybody wants to say it doesn't make sense, but that's kind of what I was leaning towards. So different from Mark, I was thinking one area first and followed by the other 2 areas, which I think are equally worthy. I just thought if the St. Paul Street area, it's kind of the landmark one. It's kind of the first one. It's kind of the distinctive one in a way, and then it's the main area. Does that make sense, James?
Yeah, no, thanks, Lorraine. It's really good feedback to get, because I think that's how we feel a little bit as well as staff, is that St. Paul is really the key focal point of the downtown. And
I think so.
I mean, the other areas certainly have, gems in them, right? And there's certainly there's character there to some of them. But the St. Paul Street as a whole, it's it's a sub area for a reason on here, right? And so yeah, no, that type of feedback is great to hear, Lorraine. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I mean, St. Paul is definitely, I think, one of the areas that, one of the key focal points that we should focus in on, because I mean, you do want to sort of retain that lovely 19th century feel that certain sections of St. Paul have. You don't want to see any more demolitions or anything happening in that section. So, Andrew?
It's an interesting point. I was just curious. I know one of the evaluations is what's the density of historic buildings within the study districts and so on. Do you have any data in terms of the density in those individual sub areas? Because my instant reaction would be, yes, St. Paul would be the priority, but that doesn't mean there isn't, say, a higher density of buildings in one of the other areas. Is there any give any information on that?
And Andrew,
Yeah.
that's why I was trying to get the information of what was in each area, because I was trying to find that out myself. Yeah.
Yeah, so through the chair, that data is in the study. We asked them to tease out the exact numbers for each, like what percentage of that study or of that sub area actually is contributing. St. Paul was the highest. It was 70%, I believe. And then I think the other two sub areas were in the 60s. And then the overall study area, which was obviously much, much larger, was about 50. So, but St. Paul was in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just trying to pull up that number in a 200-page report right now. So bear with me. But yeah, if anybody else has any questions or anything or wants to chime in while I look for that, that'd be great. Looks like Holly has her hand up.
Yeah. Holly, go ahead.
Hi there, through the chair. What happens to our heritage district of Yates Street and Queen Street?
So through the chair, those will remain unchanged. They're not part of this study. And so Yates and Queen will still be intact and will continue as is.
One question that I had when these boundaries were first drawn up, why were Gerard Street, Beecher Street, and I guess over towards Clark or Court, why wasn't that little strip incorporated? Because there's a couple of nice Victorian houses in that stretch, like the old Clench House and things like that. Should the boundaries have not gone all the way down to Welland Avenue and then maybe up, Court or Clark, one or the other?
Brian, do you mean the sub-area boundaries or the red line around, like the larger?
Well, the red line around, yeah.
So the red line around it was drawn by me, essentially.
Right.
It was to two reasons. One, we were trying to capture as many of the listed properties downtown as possible, because we wanted to make sure that those were all captured within that boundary. And then the other reason is just cost. So when you're pricing this type of project out and you have consultants that are going to be bidding on it, if you include too many properties, it becomes cost prohibitive for a consultant to want to take it on. And so, that's why, especially in the kind of north end of this, you start seeing sort of a jagged line, right in behind where all the churches are there. And the reason why is because I carved out parts of the downtown that I felt weren't as significant, and I would rather the consultants have focused their attention more on other parts. So it was really based on that. Hope that explains it.
So any little heritage buildings that are in that Gerard and Beecher Street area would have to be individual designations?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, there aren't any listed properties over there. I don't think. I think there might be a couple on Welland Avenue, which are being included in the work that the subcommittee is doing. But there weren't any listed properties over there, I don't think, that really merited the entire area to be included. And probably that area, because it's a lot of small properties, a lot of small residential properties, you're probably looking at adding 60 to 70 more properties to the Heritage District study, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're pricing it out and having to, already do a study area that's about 450 properties, you might be adding an extra 10, 15, $20,000 to the cost, and it might, deter somebody from bidding on it as well, right? So yeah, it's just unfortunately you have to draw a line somewhere.
Okay, thanks.
So I did find, Andrew, the numbers. So the entire study area is 51% contributing. The St. Paul sub area is 74%. The Civic Center sub area, which is the purple one there, is 65%, and the South Church Street sub area is 61%. But 3/4 of St. Paul Street would be considered contributing. So.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
They're still fairly respectable numbers, though.
Yeah, especially when you only need to meet 25%, right? Like the idea of contributing versus non-contributing properties is, it's hard for people to wrap their head around, but you can have as little as 75 or as little as 25% of the properties being contributing, which means essentially 75% are not, right?
Yeah.
So that can be a challenge for people to wrap their heads around, but those are the rules that have been set very recently, actually, because these were just changed in the last 5 years. So the Ontario government's decided that that's an appropriate kind of barrier for entry, I guess you could say, when it comes to deciding if something should be a heritage district. So 50% well exceeds that.
Yeah, that's part of why I asked, because I was thinking if there was one of the sub-districts was down in that, 28, 30% range, then it would be a lot less onerous if the individual designation approach was taken. But it sounds like each of the three areas is fairly intensive in its own right.
Yeah, and through the chair, I think the Civic Center sub area in particular leans quite a bit as well on maybe not traditional heritage values, like in terms of just something being old, right? And there's a few properties in there that are kind of mid-century that, because of their contribution to the downtown, they're considered contributing. And so, somebody who maybe doesn't appreciate that era of heritage or of architecture or of history might say, well, really, that's a contributing property. But certainly, the churches that are included in that sub area are, slam dunk obvious, heritage buildings, right? So, definitely think that the 75% that or 74% of St. Paul Street is very valid. I think there's some subjectivity about the Civic Center, and maybe the number of 65 is that's where it tops out, but it could be challenged to be a little bit lower than that. And I think the South Street one, which is at 61%, that's pretty cohesive, and there's a lot of really high quality buildings in that area. So I feel pretty confident that would probably stick at around that percentage. Does anybody else have any thoughts on either Lorraine's comment or the downtown as a whole? Maria?
Right. I think I like the points that Lorraine was raising. If I understood them correctly, Lorraine, you wanted to ensure that perhaps the different sub areas didn't get absorbed into anonymity, shall we say, that they somehow still retained their own distinctiveness. So if there was some procedural way of signing those districts or stating them publicly, I think that would be a benefit. Overall, the entire study area was at 50%, I think you said, James, is contributing. I mean, that's double what it needs to be by the minimums. And looking at the sub areas individually, as others have said, they're all very significant percentages. So I think looking at the entire study area as a recommendation would be the way to go, I think.
Thanks, Maria. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add to kind of discussion about the study areas and the sub areas?
Yes, if I may, through the chair, I'm all for this designated area, And the only concern I have is the opposition we were getting from the downtown businesses at the public meeting. I just don't understand their concept of why there's such red tape and that was going to add to their existence. More restrictions if they want to make any changes. As a resident of a heritage district, I've had no problems going through the Heritage Committee, with the modifications I've made to my property. And anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Oh, thanks, Sean. That actually touches on one of the things I wanted to chat about. But Brian, did you have something you wanted to add there as well?
Yeah, if we do this thing in sections, like trying to do, like, let's say St. Paul Street first and then the others after, is that going to create any kind of, is it going to present any problems down the road that, if we get one of these sections like St. Paul, passed as part of the HCD, and then let's say the Civic Center or some other part, everybody's saying, no, we don't want that to happen. Is it going to jeopardize the rest of this somehow?
Well, I think through the chair, it's not unprecedented for places to do things in phases. Toronto has, Cabbagetown, I think, has 5 or 6 phases of Heritage District there. So that's not a concern in terms of doing it that way. I think, yeah, there's always going to be concerns that people might be opposed, and then you're not able to make progress moving on to the next phase. You could say that St. Paul Street could be a demonstration of how things could work, and maybe then people become more open-minded to it. But odds are, if they're opposed from day one, they might still be opposed later on as well, right? So it's a risky take. From a cost perspective, we have the ability right now, based on the contract that we have with Stantec, to be able to do a plan that incorporates all of these. Whether or not that would still be valid, if we did one sub area right now, and then let's say it took a few years to get to the next sub area, I don't know what that would look like from a council and budget perspective. We would have to kind of cross the road when we get to it, I guess. But at the very least, we do have the funds right now to be able to do a plan that would address what's on the screen right now. So we could do, one of the sub areas and have no concerns there. And whether or not we'd be allowed to continue to use some of that money going forward, it would be a council decision essentially. So that is one of the risks, is that council could say, actually, we don't want to go forward with any of the other phases, and we won't help pay for that essentially. If that makes sense.
Do you think it would be a hard sell to do the whole thing that's in the red outline, like as a whole package, right now?
Through the chair, it's hard to say. I think yes. I think it's hard to know exactly how council will go with it, right? Because we do know there's a lot of opposition that John was talking about, and they're very vocal. And we can talk about that in a little bit as to why they're vocal about it. I do think St. Paul Street, though, everybody in the city feels that there's value there. That's the one thing that we haven't heard, is that people generally, people really appreciate the downtown and the architecture, and they understand the value of it. They're just concerned about what the cost is going to be to them, whether it's in terms of red tape or insurance or financing or anything like that, right? And so I don't think you can make an argument that it's not a heritage district, right? That it doesn't merit it. It's whether or not, the concerns about it can be alleviated, and whether or not, from a political perspective, that's palatable or not. Staff can't make that call, obviously, right? So all we can do is put forward the argument that we think that it merits it. And I think it's clear, based on our consultants' work, that it does merit it. And basically put forward the argument that heritage districts can be a positive for a lot of communities, and they certainly could be a positive here. So that's the argument we'll make as part of our staff report, essentially.
So what I was advocating was that we do it in segments, and we do it in sections, and that St. Paul Street perhaps will go very well. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but it'll go well, and that will ease the other two districts. Yes, I want them each to be sort of labeled differently, not seen as one lump of kind of thing, because I think they have great characteristics in themselves. But I think that, first of all, I think it would be more straightforward, easier to accomplish, that if they did one, I think tackling that huge, yes, they're professionals, they know what they're doing. It probably would be very straightforward for them, but for the public to see, okay, we're going to do this first, and you'll see, hopefully, that it will not become a burden, that it will, hopefully, like I said, I'm being very positive, that it will be something that um, is worth replicating.
Yeah.
That's
No,
kind of.
I think that's a valid argument to make, Lorraine. And I think from a staff perspective, we're still crafting our recommendation to council. I'm writing the staff report pretty much as we speak, and trying to figure out like what is the best way forward, right? And maybe that is, just making sure that St. Paul Street at least is, protected, and can be used as an example. It's not the worst idea, right? So yeah, but I think the feedback that we get from this meeting here is going to be helpful in terms of providing guidance for me. So yeah. Holly?
I just have a question. Does this have to be like, we spent a lot of time today from 2:30 to 4 on Main Street, and does this have to be decided today?
Yeah, through the chair it does, because my staff report has to be done in a couple weeks, and I want to make sure that I include your motion in it. And so unfortunately, the next time we meet isn't until the end of May, and by then my report will have been made public. So I do need everybody to chime in on it.
I'm just thinking back, like I know a lot of the members didn't come to the Market Square, but I know Mark did and John Crawley did. And yeah, it was quite to be there and just to observe the business owners and people from the downtown. They were quite upset. It was yeah, it was a tough room.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. It was a tough room, but it's nothing that we haven't heard before as heritage planners. It's common. Your people are always going to have concerns about what these types of studies are going to mean for them. So it wasn't surprised, and we've been talking to the downtown BIA for the last year and working with them and trying to find a path forward that works for them. And maybe that's a good time to kind of transition into like what their concerns are, and we heard them earlier with the Main Street property, talking about insurance and financing and stuff like that. And that is really two of their big concerns is, are the costs for insurance going to go up? Because we know that there are concerns that insurers have with heritage properties. And banks also, we've heard, have concerns about financing heritage properties. And both of them are really tied to risk. And as Andrew alluded to earlier, sometimes that risk is just it's an old building, right? It doesn't mean necessarily that it's a heritage building. It means that there's risk associated with age. And that's understandable. The older a building is, the more likely it is to potentially have issues. I also think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what heritage is. I think a lot of people think heritage means, don't touch anything ever, and you can't, and it's going to be impossible to do that. And, you can't update your building or anything like that. And we all know that that's not the case. But if you're somebody who's in the insurance field and you've heard about issues that have happened in other heritage properties, it's easy to paint all of heritage with the same brush. So that's kind of what we're up against a little bit. Same thing with finance, right? It's all about avoiding risk and understanding what the risk is. So what we are thinking of proposing as part of the report, and I'd like for everybody to chime in on it if possible, is kind of finding ways to offset those costs. So there's two opportunities that we feel are available to us. One is, well, we have our Heritage Grant Program, right? That this committee administers, but we also have a facade improvement program that's under our CIP program, our Community Improvement Plan program. And essentially what it does is it allows for commercial property owners to receive grants. Right now, heritage property owners can receive up to $15,000 in terms of a matching grant. And they have to meet certain criteria to qualify for the program. And we're thinking of ways that that could potentially be enhanced and used as a bigger carrot for people. So, if you're a heritage property, you might get more money to be able to, do the work that you need to do on your building to spruce it up or get it up to code or anything like that. So I'd love to hear if people think that that's a good idea. And then the other thing that we're looking into, which is something that Councillor McPherson asked us to look into last year, is a tax rebate program. Essentially, the province allows heritage properties to receive up to 40% of their taxes off. And that's, you can even target it for certain areas of the city. You can target certain property types, but essentially you can do anything from 10 to 40%. And the idea there is to offset the costs sometimes when it comes to things like insurance, or even things like, sometimes doing repairs to a heritage building might be a little more costly, or if you want to do them right, you have to get the right person to do it, right? So just acknowledging that that's, the reality of the situation for a lot of older properties. It's a way to kind of offset those costs and acknowledge that, property owners are essentially providing a public good, right? By maintaining their properties and offering, essentially they're putting their money forward to help the community, right? So those are two ways that we're looking to kind of include in our report as to how we could help property owners. Both to me sound like great ideas, but I'm curious to hear if everybody else feels the same, and whether or not we'd want to include something in the motion as well to show that you would want to see more support, more financial support given to heritage properties or heritage property owners. Sorry for that being long-winded, but Andrew?
Personally, I definitely think there should be more support given. The way I look at it is when you designate a property, you're acknowledging that the community has an interest in it, is a stakeholder in that property. But in my mind, rights and responsibilities always go together. And if the community has a stake in that property, the community has to bear some of the responsibility, and that's typically done through government. And I think that the grants are one element of it, but I think that the tax rebate system is definitely something that should be considered. And an example that I think of when you talk about that is Rodman Hall and Nino Donatelli, who has spent a great deal of his own money protecting a building that's extremely important to all of us. And when I don't know his business model, but I wonder how they're going to get by over there when you look at the insurance bills they're paying, the property tax bills they're paying, and so on. How much could you rent a hotel room out in St. Catharines, and how many do you have to rent out? He's got a long way to go before he pays those bills. I also think that the pushback is going to be a little bit along the lines of, well, if someone owns a $2 million designated house on Yates Street, they don't really need the help. And I think in an era when people are concerned about housing and social services and so on, that's not an illegitimate argument. So perhaps use and other things should be factored into it. Hate to speak out of self-interest, but I'm going to anyway. But I think a property owned by a charitable organization and operated as a for a charitable purpose that's for community benefit should receive some consideration in terms of property taxes as well, for example. And there are a number of those around the city. So I think that's an area that definitely should be explored. I'm very much in favor of it in general.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, the nice thing about a program like this is you can target specific property types. So, as much as, somebody on Yates, I'm sure would love to have a tax rebate on their property, you could just target commercial properties if you wanted to and say, commercial property owners are eligible for this program. So there's flexibility there for sure. Does anybody else? Rachel?
Hi, yeah, this is, I fully, first of all, I fully support anything that kind of gives rebates or any kind of financial incentives, as I was also at that meeting downtown, and I think that was a large part of it was, yes, insurance and financing, both of which really had to do with money. And the other thing that I think I remember hearing a lot of comments on that I'm not sure can be addressed, but I remember there was a lot of there seemed to be just a conflation between heritage permits and building permits, and just red tape and working with the city in general, and the view that, this was just another layer of red tape or not. So I'm wondering if there are any types of incentives in terms of expediting sort of the building process, or anything that would be gained by. I know that we can make the heritage permit process faster, or whatever we want it to be, and have criteria be whatever we want it to be. But in terms of then getting a building permit, which I think that was a lot of the gripes was around the building permit process. Is there anything that can be done to mitigate that?
Yeah, through the
Answer
chair.
might be no, but just I remember hearing that a lot.
Yeah, through the chair. I don't know what we can do from a building permit perspective. Maybe Tammy might be able to chime in on that. But and from a heritage perspective, at least, I think our permitting process is really, really good. We typically, we've streamlined essentially the process where, this committee is only getting maybe 1 or 2 heritage permits a month now, I think, at best sometimes. And that's because we have delegated authority now to be able to approve a lot of the really easy projects that come in. So there's, a lot of stuff that this committee doesn't see, and it's because if we took the time to bring them here, you guys would in 5 minutes say, yeah, this is fine. Why are you even here almost, right? So we've taken that, we've streamlined that. We've made it easier for people to get heritage permits if they're doing work that's appropriate. And that's, I think, has cut down on a lot of concerns, at least in places like Port Dalhousie. The downtown hasn't had that experience though, right? Like none of the properties downtown really are designated, and they haven't seen that firsthand. So, I can tell them like, no, you don't have anything to be worried about. But their experience maybe with City Hall is, 20, 30 years of dealing with City Hall. And there's a lot of experience there where they've said, no, it's been a lot of hoops I have to jump through and stuff like that, right? So I get it. I totally get it. I don't know fully how to get around that, but we're trying our best from a heritage perspective. Building also is a lot more complicated, right? And every property is different. And so, the issues that one property owner deals with might be completely different from the issues that another one has. And so often these people are, comparing apples to oranges, but they're dealing with the same, government and bureaucracy, right? So that's kind of the challenge. Tammy, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there about building permits, but.
Thank you. And through the chair, I think James captured it that our downtown business owners have gone through a lot in the past 5 years. We were on a economic upswing. There was a lot of momentum in the community in 2019, and we went through COVID. And then they come out of COVID, and then they're in another area of economic recession, and they're exhausted and they're tired. From a building permit perspective, nobody wants a building permit. Nobody wants, there's nobody who's ever in the history of time been happy with the length of time that it takes to get a building permit. And that is not specific to St. Catharines. But we do have a provincial-wide building code that must be complied with. We have done a number of process improvements and technology improvements and staffing improvements and educational training improvements in our building department. So the building department that existed 6, 7, 8 years ago has been completely overhauled, and we continue to do improvements as we go. So I'd like to think that it is a more streamlined process and that we are continuing to work with the feedback that we hear from the development community in delivering that. But at the end of the day, the Ontario Building Code applies to all 444 municipalities and has set minimum standards that must be achieved. Sometimes we do find designers and contractors who have difficulty meeting those minimum requirements, and unfortunately, those are the ones that find themselves in cycles of having to resubmit and spend more money on resubmissions. So the quality of submissions makes a big difference in how quickly that somebody can move through the building permit experience.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thanks. That makes sense.
Lorraine?
Thanks, Tammy. It doesn't sound as feasible as going back. I want to go back to the tax rebates. I think that might be a bit more feasible. I know Toronto has tax rebates for heritage properties that are commercial and industrial. And they also have, if you do conservation work, you can get a tax rebate for that as well. So easy way to we probably could sell that as something that another municipality is doing, and see how successful it is with Toronto, get that data, and then say that was something that we could use as well. The planning sounds too I think the planning would be great, but it sounds like we really have a lot of things that we have to follow the rules for, which I get. But the tax rebates we could model after another municipality and try and use that as something that would appeal to the people in downtown St. Paul.
Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, one of the interesting things is the grant program that we currently have, the facade improvement program, is really about facades, and it's really about fixing up what people can see from the street. But as we know with heritage buildings, oftentimes the issues are the things you can't see, right? And so as part of our community improvement program, our community improvement plan kind of review that we're doing this year, like I'd love to be able to explore, could we go further than just the facade, right? Like, are there opportunities to say structural issues that need to be dealt with? And those are the things that insurance have concerns about, right? Like, are we able to help contribute to make that easier for people to deal with those issues? I'd love to see that. I think that would provide a lot of value, especially to a lot of the properties on St. Paul, which are 150 plus years old, and probably they would, they need some of that work, right? So definitely, it's what I'm thinking about is how do you incentivize and get people, to make good decisions in ways that help them as well, right?
Right. And I would agree with you, the facade, yeah, that's a great idea, would look better. But I think it's really some of the structural pieces, as the people we just had talking about Main Street were talking about. We know that can be an issue. And I think that those two ideas, I think would be something I would advocate for.
Great. Thanks, Lorraine.
But if you think about, property tax rebates and things, just to play devil's advocate here, let's say you've got somebody who's got a really, really nice heritage house on Elizabeth Street or just on the other side of Welland Avenue. And so you've got property owners that are maybe getting rebates within this HCD boundary. And what about the ones that are close by or some other part of the city saying, well, wait a minute, why can't we get some too? Not fair, not fair. Is that going to be, create a can of worms too with some people?
Yeah, I think through the chair, it's definitely, I mean, certainly, right? Like but it's kind of it's a little bit more of a political decision, obviously. I think the argument that you could make is from a commercial perspective, especially something like St. Paul Street, that's very much a public good that's being provided. Not to say that a nice property on Elizabeth Street isn't providing public good as well, but the city's branding and the city's, a lot of the city's strategies are based around, the character of something like St. Paul Street, right? So acknowledging that it's providing economic kind of it's an economic positive, right? And maybe that's not the right way to say it, but something like St. Paul Street is contributing to the greater St. Catharines kind of community from an economic perspective, from a culture perspective, and all that. Whereas maybe a property on Elizabeth Street, as much as they're very lovely, they're maybe not having the same impact, I guess, on the rest of the city. But it would be obviously a political decision at that point to decide, who gets what, right? But yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody else want to chime in? I know we're getting kind of late, but I feel like this is really important. So I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to chime in on these things, and maybe we can get close to wrapping up, but I have a couple other questions to ask as well. Mark?
Yeah, I think I just agree with incentivizing financially the plan. If someone can save on taxes or save on renovations of any kind, it would be more accepted, I think. Absolutely. I know it's already been said. I really highly agree.
Thanks, Mark. The other thing I really wanted everybody to chime in on if possible, and maybe this is more for kind of Brian and Andrew and Robert and Holly and the people that are working and Mark who are doing kind of the individual designations, because I think one of the arguments that we've been hearing a lot from the downtown business owners is just do them all individually. Let people decide whether they want to be designated or not, and just do individual designations. And that's what you should have done from day one, right? And that's, it's understandable why they would have that perspective. But I think from people who do the work and who have been, doing a lot of the research and the evaluations and whatnot, we know that it's a lot harder, right? It's a lot more inefficient, and it's a real challenge to get individual designations done. And so I think it'd be appreciated if the group was able to chime in on, how challenging that can be, and why that might not achieve the goals that that a heritage district might achieve.
Well, I mean, when you look at the properties that we're looking at now for the subcommittee, we've been working on what, half a dozen buildings since last fall sometime. And, we're just getting to the state now after, say, almost half a year of work that we've got, 6 properties that might be ready to be presented to council for, individual designation. So if we're looking at 400 plus, yeah, I mean, if we've got between now and say 2050 to do all those 400 as an individual, individual designations, then we'll have to have more people on the committee to help us. It does take a lot of work to do them. The 3 that I've looked at so far, they've been like solid, weeks of work to get them. Like 260 Vine Street. That took me forever to do that one.
Yeah, through the chair, it's really challenging, especially in a place like St. Catharines, where there is a long history to a lot of these properties, and it's not always, Brian is probably the foremost expert that I've ever in Ontario land registry work, right? But I've been doing this for almost 15 years. Lauren's the same, and we have to go to him for help on a lot of this stuff because it's just not always, the easiest thing to piece together. It's a really challenging puzzle sometimes. And yeah, the amount of time and effort that it takes to do one property, with the staff that we have right now, and everybody here just volunteers, it's really, it is a challenge. So and I don't know if that's something that everybody fully understands, because they see that a study's been done in a year and it's been able to say, 450 properties should be a heritage district, right? But the idea that, in that same amount of time, you'd probably only be able to get maybe 7 or 8 properties done individually, doesn't always make sense to people, right? So, Andrew?
Yeah, I just wanted to support that point. I think that even without adding any of the downtown properties back onto our to-do list, there's too much. It's already overwhelming how much we've got to go through. And to add those back, I think makes it even more unworkable than it already is. At the same time, I do see a lot of merit. I do see some merit to the HCD approach. I see a lot of merit to the individual designation approach as well. And I think that the reason I lean towards HCD approaches, I think it's more realistic in terms of actually happening. But I do think that if we went the individual designation route, then the city would have to step up and fund the hiring of professional researchers to work through that backlog. It's all what we're doing now is already beyond the scope of in the capacity of the committee, and to add in though that batch of properties would just be a second avalanche on top of the first avalanche.
Yeah, and through the chair, we've been able to get a consultant involved with this heritage district study, and we had to put out an RFP, and we got bids, and you would have to hope that you can get other people to want to bid on the idea of doing 100 some odd or whatever the number is, individual designations, right? That might not be an appealing project for a consultant to take on. The cost of it might be pretty high. Typically on the private side, you're looking at $4,000 or $5,000 per property to do this type of report, like an individual designation. Maybe you're able to get a little bit of a discount because you're doing it in bulk. But even if you did 100 properties at $4,000 or $5,000 a piece, that number gets really high really quick, right? So this project, this study, we received funding from council to do it. That same funding probably would have only got us a sliver of the work done from individual designation perspective. So from efficiency and taxpayer perspective, it's the most friendly way of doing it for sure. The other thing that, and Mark, I know you have your hand up. I just wanted to, it's interesting because I was going to show just one photo when talking about this, and I'll just pull it up in a second. Hold on. But basically, it's the idea of, oh, I can't share my share, Lauren. Anyway, what I was going to show, anyways, was just the streetscape of St. Paul Street, which we all know very well. And to do individual designations on a streetscape like that, it's kind of, the ones you miss are it's going to be like seeing a hockey player, right, with his teeth missing, essentially, right? Like you're going to have properties that, have protection on them, and then the one next door isn't, and you're going to lose that grander streetscape that that we all appreciate, and where why we're doing the heritage district, right? Because it's about the feel of that entire street, not necessarily the intricate details of each individual building. So I think you lose that quite a bit if if you just go the individual route. So Lorraine?
I was going to say that actually, James, but as an argument for why I like the individual ones better, because you get the story. Remember the mini mart from a couple years ago? I mean, I loved hearing the depth of that story and all the little things that it had been through. And yet, when I read the ones from the consultants, it wasn't that same feel. I know it's absolutely not practical to do them individually, and I'm not recommending, that that we go back to that instead of the large. But there was a better feel to listen to someone like Brian or Andrew or anybody on the committee, Robert on the committee, talking about these houses that they had researched, and it was really a deeper, richer story. So, not that you're going to use that as a selling point, because it's the opposite, but just thought I would mention it.
It's telling a different story, right? It's like the Heritage District tells the story of that entire area, which is, the goal and the importance and why we're putting this forward. But everything has a story, right? Like, and so the nitty-gritty details of every property can be really fascinating to tell, and who worked there and why was that building there, and all. There's so much you could, Brian's written books about each property, it feels like, right? So
well, that's one thing that maybe we should keep in mind too, is even though we're doing an HCD, which is telling a general kind of story, but we also had the public outreach committee that was doing the framed histories.
Yep.
So we can still focus in if say if one of the property owners within the HCD says, well, that's great, but I'd like to know about the story of my store or my house. We can still do those framed histories and provide that as a service.
It's funny that, oh, sorry, go ahead, James.
No, go ahead. Go, Lorraine.
I was going to say, it's funny that you mentioned that, Brian, because I was going to ask to get on the agenda this week, but it was already going to be really long. But do you notice that article from, I think, by a Toronto writer about some of the restaurants in the downtown and how they were in heritage buildings and how amazing the buildings were, as well as the businesses? And I thought, if we had those framed histories, it'd be another reason to pull people into those buildings. So I would like to talk about that on a future agenda, Lauren and James, because I think that really helps people understand what the value is when they know that story.
No, I think there's a lot, like that program in particular is really interesting. I think the ability to tell the story of individual properties is something that we've actually done a pretty good job at in St. Catharines. Like you walk around the downtown and there's a lot of signage up, right? That shows, like, Adrian's done a lot of great work down there, putting up his signs. And now, like, we're building on that relationship with Adrian at the museum. And today, like, the plaque that came forward today is fantastic, right? And that type of quality, if we continue that with other properties as well, like, you can tell that story of individual properties really, really well. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of properties to tackle, but with time you'd get there, I guess, right? So
I guess I just thought about those restaurants and people coming from out of town. And it's like the CHCH has a series right now. They're in Aurelia going through their heritage area, going through and looking at different, restaurants and stores and bakeries and things. So I thought, that would be perfect for us to really, tell people more about the story of St. Catharines.
Well, I think that's why people go to downtown, right? Like it's why they go there instead of a mini mart on Lake Street or the Penn Center or anything like that, right? Like there's an added little bit of extra character there that it makes it attractive, right? And makes it more interesting. So, Mark, did you have your hand up? I think maybe earlier you did, but
Yeah, I did. And you had another point, and it was the point that I was going
okay.
to say about how St. Paul, the streetscape it has a feel in itself, right? Like I like that you used like a hockey player missing some teeth. You know, that's exactly how it would look like if we chose the individual route, individual designation route. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any point in mentioning in your report going to council, we've been trying to get, a lot of these buildings in the downtown designated since as long as I've been on the Heritage Committee. We started out with Kevin Blazowski, talking about designations and trying to get them moving. And that was like back in 2007. And, we had like, 600 properties or something at that point that we were talking about doing. So it's just a process that is never going to end if we don't do something like an HCD.
Mark?
Just a comment. I think I've mentioned this before, and I've based a whole trip from like Montreal to Boston and back based on heritage districts. I traveled to those. I think it's a big attraction. I think it would bring more people downtown as well. I know it. I just like it, but I think people, if they don't, I think people are drawn to those unique spaces, and if we can keep the charm of that downtown, I think people would just love coming here even more. If people know there's no threat to it, right?
Yeah.
They'll have more hope. There's more hope. I think more hope for business owners. I think they don't realize that yet. Building owners downtown, like it's the people that are coming there for that reason. I know that they're worried about some costs and things like that, but the people are gonna flock there even more, I believe. If they know it's protected, it's like, oh wow, we have something that's worth protecting. Maybe they didn't even know that, and then look at it in a new light. Just a comment.
No, I think that's spot on. And I think when you think about we're in Niagara. It's a tourism, it's kind of the tourism hub of the country, right? In a way. And people are flocking down here to all the wineries are growing and whatnot. And those types of experiences that people are seeking are, urban type of experiences where they can go to cool restaurants and cool buildings and, have a good time, right? And I think also just over the last few months, the amount of tourism that's gone down from going to the US, those people are now spending their money locally instead, right? And so it's a real opportunity to say, come to St. Catharines, come spend it here, come see what we've got going on, right? So I think it's really interesting. I don't know, but Rachel?
I just want to agree with that and point out that locally we have really good examples of downtowns that are, well, I don't want to slag the downtown of St. Catharines, but like Thorold did a really good job of revitalizing Front Street, and Niagara on the Lake is obviously a jewel. Those are great places to go to that have kept a lot of preservation elements in them. And I think they're really good examples of possibilities that are very, very close to St. Catharines that you could point to and say, like, look, these are examples of what basically could be. And that point that was made by Tammy, that it was on the upswing, it was going in that direction with the Performing Arts Center, the Meridian Center, and larger institutions to anchor it, and then building around that. Like, I don't think that designating it a heritage district works contrary to doing that. I think it actually works complementary to it, but I think that can be difficult when your bottom line is impacted. But I do agree with what Mark said.
Great.
Sex sells, but so does history.
Don't put that in your report. No.
No, I won't quote Brian on that. I'll find
not the first part, anyhow.
I think we've touched on most of the things I wanted to talk about. yeah, I behind the scenes, Lauren has been crafting a motion. So hopefully it kind of encapsulates what everybody is sort of saying. Really appreciate the feedback though, and there's still lots of time to give feedback. Like I'm going to be writing this over the next couple weeks. So if there's more things you want to say, by all means, send me an email and oh, Holly?
Just wanted to ask, was there any results from the survey that you handed out that night at the market? Was there any
like a few weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah, so that survey, feedback is still incoming. It closes on May 1st. If anyone here has not filled it out, please do so, because we want to get as many kind of responses as possible. We want people to chime in on things. And just because you're part of the Heritage Committee doesn't mean you can't respond personally. Your opinions in that survey are not reflective of the thoughts of the entire group. So please don't be concerned about that. Lauren?
I also wanted to chime in on, I know there had been some conversation about, like, as individuals and as members of the committee, whether or not how you could participate in, say, the council meeting, if you wanted to go and speak or provide a delegation or provide written notes, either as a member of the public or even as a member of the committee. I spoke to clerks. And he says that yes, you could definitely go if that's something that you're interested in. He recommended that, if you're going as a committee member, that not every single committee member goes. But yeah, as an individual, you're totally within your ability to go and speak to a downtown HCD and what it would mean for you and your community. So yeah.
Thanks, Lauren. So there's a long motion up on the screen, but encapsulates, I think, what we've heard today, hopefully. So I don't know if it's big on everybody's screen or not, but I can read it out. That the SCHAC recommends to council that the downtown study area, maybe downtown HCD study area, as defined in the draft study, be pursued for designation as a heritage conservation district under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And the SCHAC recommends council direct staff to proceed with the preparation of a heritage conservation plan for the downtown study area as the next step in the designation process in accordance with the requirements under the Heritage Act. That the SCHAC recommends the potential prioritization of the St. Paul Street sub-area. That the SCHAC advises council that individual designations of properties within the downtown HCD study area, probably downtown HCD study area, Lauren.
Oh yeah.
On that paragraph or that up.
Oh, that
one
yeah,
below the St. Paul Street. Yeah. Anytime where it says
Gotcha.
downtown study area, have it say downtown HCD.
HCD, I can do that.
Is not a feasible alternative to HCD designation due to the significant administrative burden it would place on both SCHC and staff. That the SCHC recommends council explore opportunities to enhance financial incentive programs, including heritage grants and property tax relief, to better support owners of properties within the proposed downtown HCD area. That the SCHC affirms the goals of establishing the Downtown Heritage Conservation District, which includes protecting the unique historic character of the city's core, promoting civic pride, supporting economic development through heritage tourism and revitalization, and providing clear, consistent design guidance for property owners to guide heritage conservation, compatible change, and development over time. Does that sound like it captured everything everybody wants in there?
I'm very open to edits in language.
Okay. So I think, is it the second from the last paragraph? So we zeroed in on sort of, I thought, more specific things because we thought that property tax relief might be confrontational or might not be accepted. We were talking about, like the example I mentioned, the information from Toronto, the idea that it was, for conservation, like conservation work. You would have rebates for conservation work. So the property tax release would be based on the fact that these were heritage properties needing conservation, and and then people had said that was, people were complaining about those kinds of costs at the meeting. So if we were more specific there in terms of our examples, so, eligible properties, we talked about, whether it was industrial and commercial, or maybe it's just all properties. That's what this sort of leads sounds like, but maybe just some more specifics. I'm not saying that the counselors wouldn't think of their own examples, but I thought if we give them more examples, similar to what other cities have, then that might be better.
Okay.
Sorry, I kind of ran on with that one.
No, that's okay. To enhance financial incentive. I'm just sorry, reading through it really quickly. I'm wondering if to support owners of properties within the proposed heritage conservations. Maybe we should include maybe a sentence in here about seeing that that these have been successful in other communities.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And you know what?
So,
and then maybe they'll investigate that. And I think that having this in here kind of helps with the naysayers. So, that we have discussed as a committee, the people's opposition to some of the ideas. And we have come up with these suggestions for how it could help owners in the property area.
Yeah, in other municipalities across Ontario, I think would be the,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
means that we're recognizing that that we've heard that, there's some opposition and maybe this is something that will be helpful.
No, I think that's good, Lorraine. Does anybody else have anything they'd want to add? Robert?
Just in the same spot, eligible. Shouldn't we be looking at commercial property tax relief?
Yeah, we had said commercial, and then Andrew had said charities, and then I don't know if there's any industrial in the area or not.
Yeah, I don't know about industrial. We could
But
say
commercial for sure.
Yeah, commercial and institutional, would that be?
Yeah, commercial and institutional. Yeah, that might be good.
I'm not sure if that covers it.
Do we want to expand, just a suggestion after enhanced financial incentive programs for property owners? I know it's pretty implicit when you read it out, but just those are the people that were.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
That's good. We have it in the last sentence, but I think it's good to put it there too, to like better support owners of properties.
Yeah, no, I think that works.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that wants to chime in? Could you zoom out a little bit, Lauren, so you could see a little more of the.
So one thing that we didn't put in here, and maybe you want to stay away from it, is do we want the idea of doing it in segments, or is that something you're going to put in your report?
So I think saying the potential prioritization of St. Paul Street kind of implies that if it was going to be done in segments, that one should be the one that's prioritized.
Okay.
And I think from a staff perspective, when we start coming up with our actual recommendation, if we decided to say, you know what, let's recommend to council that St. Paul Street should be tackled first, this corresponds to that, right? Like this is that's the message that you've given as well, is that that's the area that we should be prioritizing. So
right.
Okay, Robert.
For my 2 cents. I think the second priority should probably be the Church Street South area. Almost every building in that segment is heritage. It's just a tremendous district.
Yeah, it is really nice there. Yeah.
I thought that one had 61%.
It has 61%. There's a few properties in there that aren't contributing that are very obvious, and then but the ones that do contribute are all of very high quality. Yeah,
and that's my 2 cents. And don't necessarily have to put that in. I mean, I think it's adequate.
That's up to the group. I do think just if everybody doesn't feel comfortable with what the second priority would be,
I would just leave it at
just having the St. Paul Street one. I think sends a strong message as well that like St. Paul is really important.
I just didn't chime in earlier, so I thought I would now.
No, that's good, Robert. I appreciate it. But I think what this does at least is it like really focuses on St. Paul Street, right? It says like this
Yeah.
one is special. Like,
I
yeah.
absolutely agree with that. Thank you.
Maria?
Oh, sorry.
Maria, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Do you think it would be worthwhile in the statement that mentions the St. Paul Street sub-area to quote the percentage statistic that it achieved at 74%, or is that too pandering?
No, we could if we want. We could even say like, yes, recommends due to the high concentration of contributing heritage properties within, or potentially contributing heritage properties within that street. You could even go even further and talk about the importance of St. Paul Street as like the, you know, the hub of our downtown, or the focal point of our downtown, or something like that, right? If you wanted to.
And bringing people to visit that, as Mark was talking about.
Yeah.
So the paragraph below, I wonder if you should add the word volunteers after SCHAC.
Sure.
Yeah, right there.
Okay. Anything else we want added? I think this to me looks really good.
Yeah, I like this.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong motion, I think. And I think it's encapsulated everything we've talked about in the last 45 minutes. And also just, you know, what this committee has kind of been doing over, you know, since I've been here, right? Over the last 3 or 4 years. Like this, the tone of this is, you know, exactly what we've been doing. So
I'd be happy to make this motion.
Great. Thanks, Robert.
So if there's no further discussion about it, then I guess all in favor of the motion? And I think that's done.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. This will go into my report. I will be copying and pasting it after this meeting. And that report should be made public probably in the next couple of weeks. I will make sure that everybody's aware when it's made public. And yes, please fill out the survey that's on our Engage page if you haven't done so already. And don't be afraid to tell your friends and, you know, anybody else who you think might be interested in chiming in. Yeah, it'd be really appreciated.
Thank you, James, for all your hard work in the committee.
great.
Absolutely.
Thank you, James.
Great work.
Other members.
Yeah, I'll keep you informed on what's going on with Mayhome.
Thanks, Brian.
Why, something going on with Mayhome?
Well, we were thinking of having them write a letter of recommendation for the support of the HCD. And they're sort of a little bit not quite sure about what they should be doing.
Yeah. I was hoping you weren't going to say that Mayhome was closing. That's why I wanted to make sure.
Not yet, anyway.
They've been around too long.
So considering the late hour of the day, I guess we're probably going to skip over 7.4, 8.1 and all those items. So moving straight to item 10, the date of the next meeting, which will be not April 24th.
Oh,
be the end of,
it's the
end of
I think
May
it's
sometime.
the end. Yeah, it's here. Let me pull up.
May 29th.
Wait, yeah, it's the last. Yeah.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, I guess we need a motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion. All in favor? Okay, so it's 5:15 according to the clock on my laptop. So thank you, everybody. And we shall see you at the end of May.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Stick work. Thank